everybody, Alec Alger the Side Quest Gamer here, and happy Halloween, everybody. Unless you're one of those nations who doesn't celebrate it, or just someone who's just sitting around the house. Thank you all for tuning in, and today I got a real treat for you. I'm going to be reviewing my favorite Castlevania game of all time. Today we're looking at Super Castlevania IV. I know, you people might think that's a stupid title, but it's on the Super Nintendo, and it's well worthy of that title. Now let's take a look at it, we'll roll the footage, and see if it still holds up.
I cannot stress enough how much I love Super Castlevania IV for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. It is well worthy of having Super in front of the title. I mean, even the title is awesome. As soon as you start the game, you are treated to an intro cutscene where lightning strikes a grave and a magical bat appears next to it. It looks ominous and evil. And then text scrolls telling the story of the game. Now this game is supposed to be a remake, but the text interprets it as a sequel of sorts. I mean, it says that every 100 years after Dracula is killed, he is reborn, and then the Belmont clan will arise to defeat him. Then it says Simon Belmont, the game's protagonist from the first and second game of the NES trilogy, once again sets out to destroy Dracula. Every 100 years, Dracula is reborn, and Simon once again sets out to destroy him. Jeez, that must mean he's at least 120 years old. I mean, I do have a theory. In Simon's quest, he spent the entire game trying to get rid of a curse Dracula cast on you before he died. So by reversing the curse that would kill you shortly, it prolonged your life, instead of just going back to normal. So now, instead of dying, now you live forever. One thing that supports the theory is that the grave that was struck resembles the one Dracula was buried under in the end of the good ending of Simon's quest. And well, a bat appeared next to the grave after lightning struck it. So that must be Dracula. So Simon Belmont must be over 100 years old and is probably immortal. So by 2035, when Aria of Sorrow took place, he might even be alive then. Alucard had a similar curse, and he's still alive from the 13th century to the 21st century. But that doesn't matter now. Let's talk about the game, because it's probably a remake. So basically, Dracula's back from the dead after 100 years, and 120-year-old Simon Belmont, supposedly, who hasn't aged since past 20, has to go through many levels, defeating Dracula's minions before fighting the Prince of Darkness himself. But let me tell you that your experience with Simon Belmont has never been more ideal, since you have a whip that can attack in all the 8 directions. So the infamous Medusa Head's enemies will be less of a hassle with all 8 directions. It's finally a fair experience, and although knockback is still an issue, it's more preventable thanks to the 8-directional whip. Although, even with most of these issues fixed, the Clock Tower is still the most despised level in the game, just like other Castlevania entries. The game was directed by, I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, Masahiro Uno, who was credited in the game's credits as Jun Furano since Konami doesn't allow people to use their real names in the credits for some reason. But Uno also was the main programmer of this game. From my research, this is his first 16-bit game since this game was supposedly begun development in 1989. He worked on both the Japanese and English versions of the game, in which, for the English version, he removed what appeared to be blood on the 8th stage of Super Castlevania IV for censorship reasons. And yet they had no problem showing Medusa an apparent 16-bit nudity. I mean, technically she's not human, so it's not nudity, but you might say otherwise. I mean, see it for yourself. She's the final boss of level 2. I never understood why Japanese versions of each video game would tone down the game for the English-speaking audiences, but maybe that's why America didn't get Rondo of Blood when it first came out. I mean, the first level had a village burning down. The level design is amazing and arguably the best in the series. These levels are gimmicky but adds to the atmosphere as a result. You have a lot of memorable levels in this game, especially Stage 4 with its rotating room and spinning background. Well, enemy placement can be cheap sometimes, especially in the library where there's like a narrow platform with a reviving skeleton walking around on it. So say you kill it, and as soon as you land, you better get off to the next platform or the will revive and knockback will be there to throw you into the abyss and you'll die. There are a lot of bosses in this game. Sometimes you'll even fight a boss in the middle of a stage. Some of them are really easy and take less than 3 seconds to defeat, especially if you have the boomerang. While others are tricky and or annoying, especially the skeletal bird. But the final boss, Dracula himself, is epic. Well, the music is well done and memorable. The best soundtrack is Simon's theme. You hear it on the first level of the game. And I'm surprised that the cartridge could handle the sound quality because it still holds up to this day. It's composed by, I'm sorry if I mispronounce these names, Masanori Adachi and Taro Kudo, but like the director, their names are different in the credits because at the time, KONAMI didn't allow the use of real names, which would explain Bello Lugosi and Bram Stoker in the credits of Castlevania 1 for the NES. Some of the music in Super Castlevania IV is remixed tracks from the previous 3 NES games. Give it a listen, and see for yourself. Are really nice to look at even to this day, especially for the intro cutscene. The effects and animations were so well done that they really aged well. In fact, market this game as a smartphone game and I bet the younger generations couldn't tell the difference. I really like Simon Belmont's sprite model, since he looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger's Conan the Barbarian, not the Jason Momoa version. But he looks so awesome, and you can tell that this guy is the vampire hunter. Yeah, the controls are quite smooth. I like how the R button lets you use a sub-weapon, because pressing up an attack wasn't always convenient, especially on the staircase. I like how you can also swing your whip around by holding the attack button and tapping the directional buttons around, which can be really helpful in taking out bats and enemy projectiles. But swinging Simon Belmont's whip on hooks on the ceilings is really fun. Even if it gets overused in later levels, it's a neat gimmick that makes you feel like Indiana Jones. Unfortunately, in this game, there isn't any other characters you get to play as, but at least Simon Belmont is useful enough to the point where you don't need extra characters. So overall, I would give this game a 96.5 out of 100. While there's a rare cheap knockback, it's a perfect Castlevania game nonetheless, and I can easily recommend this game to everyone. This is easily one of my all-time favorite games for the SNES in general, and my favorite Castlevania game of all time. So why do I like this game better than Symphony of the Night? Well, because Super Castlevania IV was simple and can be beaten in a day or less, while Symphony of the Night is a real time investor. By the time I beat Symphony of the Night, it took me around 13 hours, and I don't always have that much time on my hands. And with my short attention span, I might want to move on to a game after 10 hours. But I did beat this nonetheless, and I loved every minute of it. Even the backtracking wasn't too bad. But I also thought that all the alternate endings offered in Symphony of the Night were underwhelming, while Super Castlevania IV only its ending reminded you of the incredible adventure you embarked on, kind of like the ending of Super Mario Bros. 3. And it's fantastic. But that's just my opinion. So I would like to say that Super Castlevania IV is linear Castlevania at its best, and although Rondo of Blood and Dracula's Curse were great, they don't compare to Super Castlevania IV in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, they're both fantastic, but Super Castlevania IV is the perfect Castlevania.
Thank you all so much for tuning in to my video this Halloween. But if you're tuning in after Halloween, that's alright too. At least you're watching the video. Now if you're new here, please subscribe to my channel. I'd really like to have you here. Please like this video and share it with your friends, especially if they're also Castlevania fanatic. Again, happy Halloween. Remember to stay awesome.